Have you ever wondered why layer cake quilts are so popular? I honestly thought different pre-cut fabric quilts like layer cakes are popular because some of the cutting is already done for you. But now I really think it's because the layer cake cut of fabric gives you 42 10-inch squares of fabric, and it's such a variety of fabric, oftentimes a full line of fabric. So it is a cost-effective way to get a whole bunch of prints of fabric from a line of fabric that you love. But there might even be more to it than just that. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Why are layer cake quilts so popular? Today I'm going to share another layer cake friendly quilt pattern with you. And I've shared a lot of different layer cake patterns on my channel here before. I have the very popular disappearing 9-patch video. I have two different plaid inspired patterns, as well as an argyle pattern and the big half square triangle quilt. I will link to those videos in the description of this video. Now let's get started on this layer cake pattern. So here is what you'll need to bring this quilt pattern together. Of course, you're going to need a layer cake. I have chosen this layer cake bundle. It's 42 10-inch squares, timeless treasures, and it is a red work design. All of the fabrics are red. There are a few in here that will be tricky that are very, very plain. They're a tone-on-tone white. But for this pattern, I'll be able to make it work. In addition to the layer cake, you're also going to need some accent fabric. Accent number 1, you will need 3 1/4 yards of this fabric. And then accent 2, you're going to need 1 yard. Just pick 2 fabrics that will coordinate really well with your layer cake. Now to get started, you'll want to press both of your fabrics really well. And with accent number 1, you're going to cut 168 5 1/4 inch squares. And then with accent number 2, you're going to cut 168 3-inch squares. Now I want to give you 2 tips for using a layer cake. The first tip I have for you is to not starch this fabric. I never start my pre-cuts like charms and layer cakes or jelly rolls because if you starch them and press them, they can shrink. And if you're needing a specific size, you're going to warp that fabric and it's not going to turn out the size that you want your quilt to be. The second tip is to measure your squares right out from the start. They are supposed to be 10 inches, but you'll notice a lot of times around the edge of the layer cake, they're pinked. So that means they have like a zigzag edge to it. And you'll want to know if the measurement for that block measures out to 10 inches at the peak of those pinked edges or at the valley. That will really help you when sewing your 1/4 inch seam to know where to line up. So once we get all of the accent fabrics cut, we're going to start building the block. So we will meet at the sewing machine and start sewing. Here is the block that will bring this quilt together. So to make this block, you will need 1 of the 10-inch squares, 4 of the 5 1/4 inch squares, and 4 of the 3-inch squares. So after cutting all of your accent fabric, the only prep work you'll need to do is to mark corner to corner on each of the squares. So each of the 5 1/4 inch squares and each of the 3-inch squares. After marking corner to corner, you're going to want to mark a 1/2 inch away from that marking on one side. So do that on all of the squares. Now on my darker fabric, I found that hair marker works better to mark the corner to corner. I can see it better. This just leaves a crease. So mark corner to corner and then 1/2 inch away. Now, I don't want to tell you this is a fast quilt to make. Not all quilts have to be fast, right? But making the block is actually pretty easy. So what we're going to do is sew one of these squares into each corner of this 10-inch square. And when you place the squares in the corners, you're going to want that second line that we drew closer into the corner. And we're going to sew along both of these lines. And we're going to do this in every single corner of this 10-inch square. So I got one of those lines sewn and I'm going to sew the next line. And so here these squares will overlap a little bit. So I'm going to do opposite corners. So again, make sure that the second line we drew is facing the corner. Line this up and then sew. All right, we got opposite corners sewn and I'm gonna give this a quick press. And then what we're going to do is cut right down the middle of these two sewn lines. So about 1/4 inch away from the sewn line. And then you see here, those corners that we cut off, since we already have them sewn, make half square triangles. So I'll show you what to trim these up to after I finish up this block. But for now, set the half square triangles to the side. All right, so the block is looking like this, and we are going to press these over. Add some heat after you finger press it. And just for reference for you, the whole time we're working on this block, it should measure 10 inches. Now we have 2 more of these 5 1/4 inch squares left, and we're going to put them on the next 2 corners. So line it up again. That second line we drew is going to be facing the corner, and then just sew across those lines. All right, let's do the next one. All right, we're going to give it a little press and then cut between the sewn lines again. Set the half square triangles to the side. And then I'm going to press the seams for this block. Such pretty fabric. I love red fabric. All right, this block is looking so cute. I love this fabric. We have the final accent fabric to sew on now, and you guessed it, we're going to do the same thing in the corners again. So line it up in the corner and sew across both seams. And this time I'm going to do all 4 sides since we're not going to be overlapping these squares any. It's a lot of sewing to do up front since we're going ahead and making the half square triangles now, but I think it's worth it. It's still worth it to go ahead and sew that second line of stitches so that you can use these as half square triangles later, maybe in a scrappy quilt or something like that. All right, so here are all the squares sewn on. I'm going to press these and then cut them right between the stitches and press the seams. Set all of the half square triangles to the side. Gonna finger press them first. All right, and there is another block done. And it's just gonna come together so cute. It's going to make a lot of diamonds throughout this quilt, and I love the way red and black looks together, so I'm really excited for this. All right, so I'm gonna set these to the side and show you how to trim up the half square triangles. So first we're going to press the seams on all of these half square triangles, the larger ones and the smaller ones. All right, so once the larger squares are pressed, I'm going to trim them down to 4-inch squares. So I'm going to line a trim lock up so the diagonal line goes right down the seam, and then I'm just going to trim all 4 sides. All right, and so just like that, we have one of the half square triangles trimmed up. And I'm going to get all 4 of these trimmed up just like that. Same thing, I'm going to line a 2-inch trim lock up on the half square triangle and just trim around. Cute little half square triangle. They're tiny. I'm going to do the same thing with the other 3 as well. All right, so those are the half square triangles. So I'm going to keep working on all these blocks. I have 40 more to make. Then I will piece the quilt top together. So here is the finished quilt top behind me, and I absolutely love how it turned out. I love red and black together, and I really think the design really still highlights the layer cakes in this pattern. You can still see all of the fabric designs because it's still nice big pieces of that fabric. But the accent fabric really helps highlight the design too, and I love how this quilt turned out. It is so pretty. I can't wait to baste it and get it all quilted up. Now, if you remember, there was a lot of extra little bonus half square triangles when bringing this pattern together. These are the 4-inch half square triangles, and I already decided on a layout for using these. I'm really excited to sew it together. Half square triangles are so versatile, so I'm going to put the design up on the screen here that I am going to use, but there are so many different options. Now, if you just use these leftover half square triangles, you can get a quilt that is about 42 by 49 inches. So a nice size little quilt can be made with these. You could also add in more fabric or add a border if you wanted to make it even larger. So a fun bonus quilt. In the layout I showed on the screen, there are 14 rows in this layout, and there are 12 half square triangles in each of the rows. I also have a fun plan for all of these teeny tiny half square triangles. They are 2 inches. Now, if I just used those, I wouldn't get a very big quilt, but I just so happen to have a ton, and you saw these before, a ton of 2-inch scrap fabrics, a ton here to use up. So I'm going to combine these with the half square triangles to make a really fun quilt. I will share the design and the layout in an upcoming video. So if you'd like to see that, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you can see that video when it releases. I really am excited. I already made some sample blocks and I think it's going to be a really fun scrappy quilt. So after completing this fun quilt, I'm going to have a really fun bonus quilt, and I'm going to use some of the fabric from it to make a fun scrappy quilt as well. So this was definitely a fun quilty make for me. I love when I already have a plan for the fabric left over from a quilt that I make. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you plan to make this quilt, I would love for you to let me know in the comments below and let me know what layer cake you plan to use for it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!